Welcome to the Livfiit Listens podcast, a safe space of growth, personal development, and overall wellness with your host, Olivia Catania. Diving into the realms of all things health, conscious living, mental expansion, and much more, this podcast is designed to help you evolve into your best self and live fit. Let's get into the show. Hello, you guys. Welcome back to another episode of the Livfiit Listens podcast. Wow. What an absolute insane week it has been this past week since just the last time I dropped an episode. I feel like the whole entire world has exploded, imploded, whatever you want to say. I feel like I cannot go on social media without hearing just about everything. We had numerous catastrophes this past week. I never really get into current events, but I feel like it's just kind of tying into why I feel pulled to really make this podcast episode today and just kind of reconnect and make it known of what I believe and my faith. And that has always kind of been a facet of this podcast. Not kind of been. Spirituality has definitely been a piece of this podcast. And I think I have quite a solid kind of community of listeners who are here for that kind of spiritual component. So it's 100% correlates. And I feel like it's been a while since I've spoken about faith and my spirituality and kind of what I believe in. And I feel like now more than ever, I want to make it known what I believe. And I want to offer a resource for anyone who is curious, who wants to know more, / also offer a sense of community for those who are kind of in a similar boat as me or who also cares about their faith and want to feel supported in that and knowing that there's other people who do believe in all of the things. We're going to dive into this topic. I feel like I want to do a big fat disclaimer. This episode is going to really essentially be about the cross-section of spirituality and religion. I had such a holy crap moment when I kind of went through this research rabbit hole. I want to say if you are someone who is very convicted in your religion or you're very strict, hardcore Christian, Catholic, whatever it is, and you want no sense of open thinking, of expanding the conversation or explorative thinking, I'm just going to urge you to not listen to this episode. It may be very triggering for some people who are very serious in the religion and take that completely as face value, and that's their container and that's all they believe and want to believe and are not open to any other explorative conversations. Please, I just recommend to click off this episode. I think the reason why I honestly wasn't going to do, because I had to have this revelation a couple months ago now, I feel like at this point. It was over the summer. And I thought to maybe do a podcast episode, then I was like, I don't know. But then after everything that's been going on, I wanted to do a podcast episode about how to kind of start connecting with your faith for those who are looking to say, hey, I kind of want to get into a sense of faith, whether that's spirituality, whether that's religion, whatever. I want to get to know a higher power. Where do I start? I want to do an episode on that, which is going to be coming after this one. But when I was outlining that episode about how to start with your connection in faith, I felt the need to kind of preface where I'm at with my spirituality, which made me be like, honestly, I have too much to say. I kind of just want to make a whole podcast episode on this because I think it's very interesting where I'm at with it, and also I think there's going to be people who are very interested in what I have to say, and I think there's also going to be people who resonate a lot with my position in terms of faith and spirituality. So anyways, that's my disclaimer. If you're very strict in Christianity, into a religion, you do not want to explore any other possibilities, whatever, even though this whole entire episode is backed by research, first of all. But again, if you have zero tolerance for it, just click off. You are most likely going to be triggered and disagree. That's kind of also my thing with my faith recently is like, I feel like I don't, let me really start with this. I grew up Catholic, majority. I was baptized. I went to a private Catholic school up until 6th grade where we would pray before the school day and we would pray before every single new class. We would pray before lunch. And the first Wednesday of every month, we would go to mass as a school. I received my first communion. I even stuck with it after, because that school only went to 6th grade, like then the school ended. And so then I had to switch schools. And then at that point, I went to a public school that wasn't religious at all. but you still could opt in to enroll in religion, which is what I chose to do starting in 7th grade. And I did that for 7th and 8th grade, I believe. And that was only, again, I think it was every Wednesday you would go and walk across the street to like the church that was near us and have like kind of like a Sunday school-esque kind of situation of just like learning more about religion. But looking back, that honestly like did nothing for me, to be honest with you. I don't like really even recall much of anything that we would talk about. But then when I was 15, so I must have done it longer than that. I guess I must have done it 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th. Because how old are you when you receive confirmation? I'm not sure, but it's another sacrament of the church. And so that happens, I thought, when you're around like 15, if I remember correctly, which I thought would be like a sophomore in high school. So maybe I did stick with going to religion for longer than that. I don't know. But anyways, I obviously know that I went through the confirmation process and was confirmed, which is, again, just another sacrament in the sense of religion and Christianity and whatever. Gonna be honest, I don't know. I can't like really decipher the exact differences between Christianity and Catholicism, but I was raised in that sector, okay? So that's like my background. So I've always grew up believing in something. Like I believed, in God and all of that sort of stuff. But then as I kind of gotten older and I learned more about the constructs of religion, I felt like there was a lot of kind of man-made pollution in it. And there were certain things that like I didn't really agree with or I felt like were contradictory. And that's kind of where I wanted to go out and explore other things, which led me more to spirituality. And I guess I'm in this point where I don't feel like I fit in the box enough to be considered like Christian or Catholic or whatever and like be that churchgoer. Like I feel like I kind of what I mean why I said that the trigger warning in the beginning of the episode. I don't really think that how I practice is necessarily accepted by majority of like the mainstream Christian narrative. So I don't really feel like I fit in there, but at the same time, I'm not so spiritual where I don't believe in the sense of like Jesus or where I don't believe in, certain foundations of Christianity. Like I still believe in those foundations. So at the same time, it's like I don't feel like I fully fit into the spiritual community either. And I feel like I walk this line of the blending of the two, which is what I want to get into this podcast episode, because I've kind of have always felt that way where I'm like, I definitely believe in a higher power. I definitely believe in the concept of God. Do I necessarily think that he's this man in the sky that is kind of preached in Christianity and whatnot? Like, I don't, like, that doesn't really resonate a ton with me either. Like that doesn't seem like crystal clear to me. But do I believe that Jesus was real and a real person? Yes. So it's like, I'm just saying I kind of have things where I feel like I walk the line between spirituality and Christianity, which kind of has led me to feel a little bit almost alone in my practice in a sense at times, which has been fine for me. And I like have that, still confidence and conviction and integrity in what I'm doing and like knowing that this is like my path for me to explore and I'm free to explore that. But I still kind of want to offer a hand for someone who feels the same way as me, who feels like they don't really fit in either way and who could kind of use a little bit of affirmation and almost validation is the word I want to use to blend the two, because this discovery that I had was very affirming and validating to me of what I've believed for this time. So I do know in the past and previous, I don't remember exactly what I said, but I just remember there was a Q&A years ago now at this point that I did on here that asked me if I believed in God. And I don't remember what I really should just find it and see what I said. But I think in the episode I said, like, do I believe it's a man in the sky? Not necessarily, but I do believe in a higher power. So I'm not trying to like contradict myself or go back on any which way, but also at the same time, like I'm also humble enough to say my journey in faith is always evolving and I'm always trying to learn and explore and see what feels good and see what feels as truth. And to me, that's kind of like a fluid thing. And if I definitely spent more time going more exploring the spiritual route in my early 20s. And I do want to say, I feel like I'm coming more so towards, I don't even want to say going towards the side of religion. I'm just saying more so finding the balance and synergy in a more balanced way between spirituality and religion. I honestly have no outline for this episode. So if I'm rambling, we're rambling. But sometimes those are my favorite episodes because then I really just feel like I am just channeling at that point. So I already stated what I believe in, or I should say how I was raised, what my background is. I do believe in the sense of a God. I do believe in a higher power. I never have not believed in that. I've never not believed in Jesus. Do I think every single story in the Bible is like completely factual at face value? I'm not even sure, because I've never even read through the Bible. So like, to me, I don't even feel like I'm necessarily qualified to speak on that. But again, I just want to make this episode to make it known that like, even if I don't fully identify in Christianity, or I'm more on the spiritual side of things, I resonate more spiritually, like I will never ever ever deny the presence of God, and I want to make that known. I want to make that loud and clear. And I believe in my problem with religion is that it feels like it's almost too constricting, that like it intimidates people. It puts people in too much of a box where they feel like there's a right way to do it, where there's no like breathing room. And again, it's intimidating, it's overwhelming. There's like this forceful way of how you have to do it and how you have to practice. In my opinion, which again we'll get into in the part 2 of this episode next week, is like, it is something that is free flowing. I think faith is something that's so individual and independent to the person. And I think it is something that does not need to look the same from person to person. How someone's going to practice, it might be different from the next person. Where someone feels closest to God in the universe might be a different practice than how someone else feels closest. Someone might feel closest to God when they're in church on Sunday. And for me, I feel absolutely closest to God when I'm sitting in stillness and I am really going inwards and just sitting and listening and being. That's when I feel closest to God. And I think that I would never tell someone that there's this one way to do it, because I think that it's completely contradicting the exact point of faith and connection to the divine and a higher power. So I will continue that conversation as we get to the next episode, but I want to dive into this before I keep going off on side tangents and not really ever getting to the core of this episode. So really, again, knew that I was raised Catholic and Christian and all that sort of stuff, started to go more the spiritual route, because I feel like in terms of what I believe in my spirituality, I felt like it's like the core of what religion and Christianity is getting at, without necessarily the man-made construct and power authority of the church. Like, in my opinion, and why I felt like my spirituality felt right to me and felt good to me, is I felt like it was the core values of the foundation of what Christianity is getting at, without the pollution of the control mechanism of the church that was developed. So I watched, which I totally like. I can't recommend it enough. I'm a very harsh movie critic, and I love this movie, The Da Vinci Code. Okay, I recommend everyone who watches it who is interested in this kind of a conversation. I thought it was so fascinating, and it really opened up. But like, it's a fictional storyline, but it really opened up so much questioning for me. And then after, like the morning after, I literally went down a rabbit hole of researching all this stuff, because it almost was like affirming things that the questions I had in terms of the church and the development of the church and development of religion and everything. And if you go down the rabbit hole, it's absolutely insane. So basically, like, I'm not going to spoil the movie, but the movie was essentially about how, like, really how, like, the female voice in Christianity has been suppressed. Like, if you think about it, there's priests, there's bishops, God is a man, Jesus is a man. It's very much so, there wasn't a lot of women's opinions were not valued in that sense, at least in the sense of the church, right? Everyone who is in a seat of power is male. There's always this authority structure, this hierarchy structure, that you need to go to a priest, you need to go to a bishop, you need to go to the pope. There's always this like masculine hierarchy of who's in charge and who is in power and who you need to go to. And there's not that equivalent at all on the female side. Even in like the majority of the concept of Christianity is usually like the thought leaders, the ones who were in charge, the kind of the quote unquote enlightened ones, their majority portrayed as males predominantly. And so the whole thing in the movie really emphasizes Mary Magdalene, which again, if you guys are not familiar with Christianity, this is like probably going to go over your head for the most part. But Mary Magdalene, and again, I'm not like completely well versed in all this, I'm no expert, but Mary Magdalene was someone who was involved in the story of the Bible and everything. And in the Da Vinci Code, she's really portrayed more accurately, of the role she really played as someone who really was Jesus's right-hand man or woman, supposedly, and someone who really knew what Jesus was teaching. But she was so discredited at that time because women were just suppressed and not taken seriously, because the men wanted to be able to maximize their control and power. And for me, in my opinion, and what I believe in the sense of spirituality, is I talk about this quite a bit, is there is the duality of masculine and feminine. And I always found that so interesting of like, I do believe in that duality in terms of the creation of life and everything. And I found that so interesting that there's not that concept of the divine feminine in religion, but yet there is very much so that concept of divine masculine with what I just said of Jesus, God being a man, priests, popes, bishops, all of that sort of stuff. But there's no real representation of the divine feminine. I don't want to speak in terms of absolutes. I want to say, stereotypically speaking, at face value, there's very little representation of the divine feminine in religion. And this movie speaks on kind of why that is and how that started. And even if you look back to the whole concept of like the witchcraft era, where these women were burned at the stake, right, for being witches and knowing too much or whatever it is, or spreading this and that. Like, I also find that super interesting that then women were removed. Like, anyone who said that they knew more or who had more intuitional value and truth, or who, had more wisdom to share, they were seen as witches and that they needed to be removed because there couldn't be an enlightened woman in a position of power, which is so interesting. Again, if you look at the majority themes in history. And so you might ask, like, I was asking, why is that though? Why was kind of the divine feminine trying to be silenced? Why is this like the biggest gaslighting thing in history in terms of religion and such, that like women were kind of constantly discredited and weren't seen also as someone who had wisdom and wasn't seen as someone who was enlightened. And that's kind of where it goes into the development of the church, which is why I kind of said I had the trigger warning situation here, because to me it makes a lot of clear sense of why this would be, because the church wants to be able to have as much power and authority as possible, and they want to be the one in charge, aka introduce patriarchy of having the men be able to be in charge and have the most power, rather than needing to share it in duality with the divine feminine and go as a pair, right? It's almost, to me, it seems like kind of a greed thing for power and control. The men don't want to share it. Like, men want to have absolute control by having one person in charge, which kind of led to the formulation of the church, the hierarchy, men always being in authority in the church, etc. So really this led me go down a whole rabbit hole of research of Mary Magdalene, what actually was her role in terms of her companionship with Jesus, and what was their kind of relationship, but more so, what was she preaching kind of at that time, or what were her beliefs at that time that led her to being so ostracized and kind of pushed out. Because additionally, furthermore, in my research, Constantine, so in Rome, in Italy, all of that, when the Roman Empire, when they were trying to be, obviously, and this is what I'm saying with the church, of how then it's such a slippery slope and a blurred line, because it's at one point it's religion, right? Or at one point we're talking about faith and Christianity, but it's such a slippery slope of when that turns into power, control, and money, right? And politics. So at that point in time, there were so many different sectors of Christianity at that point in time, where it's hard to lead a group of people when when all of our belief systems are kind of all over the place. It's so much easier to lead people when everyone is unified and believing the same thing. So Constantine was the one who said, I don't think he necessarily did it exactly, but he said that he was the one who initiated that we need to basically hone in on all of these different branches of Christianity. We need to decide what we're accepting and what we're rejecting. We need to consolidate these books into the Bible and have this is what we're believing, this is what our code is. So he has more uniform like control and power, and kind of more political power in a sense, to lead and unite the whole Roman Empire and everything, that whole entire era. So with that, some books were rejected to not be included in the Bible, such as the Book of Mary, aka Mary Magdalene. So my point in this is just saying that there are other kind of voices and other takes on Christianity and other sectors of it that just were completely banished and ignored, because it went against basically what Constantine wanted in order to be able to unify the people of the Roman Empire. And even if you look up who Constantine is, like I just did on ChatGPT, it says he was the Roman emperor who played a pivotal role in shaping Christianity in the Roman Empire. Again, please also fact check me. Like I'm not an expert. I'm not even wanting you guys to take what I say at face value. Like I want this just to be an open conversation, something that was a very interesting find for me and my research. And I just want this to be as something to kind of get the wheels turning in your own brain, just to further ask questions and dive into more research and find out for yourself, I guess, if you will. So again, that's where I'm saying he played a pivotal role in shaping, keyword shaping, Christianity. It says Constantine's reign marks the beginning of Christianity's transformation from a persecuted movement to a state-backed church. And so for me, when I was researching all this, I'm like, this seems to kind of be, this is where the bridge happens of what I'm saying, of like the core of Christianity, the faith part, and then now having it kind of morphed into this state-backed church authority, power kind of structure, etc., hierarchy situation. And that's where it kind of blended of like, yes, this was something that was true and honest and pure, and it kind of now got transitioned into something to be used as a unifier, to be able to have more political power, to be able to have more control and unity in a nation. And that's to me where I kind of feel like this is interesting. Now we added a whole other layer, and to me that's the introduction of the church, which I feel like is different from like the core teachings and foundation of what religion really is about. So now getting to the whole pinnacle, okay, of this whole podcast episode, circling back to Mary Magdalene, when I went down the rabbit hole researching her, right, because she also played obviously a very pivotal role, a very important role in the whole story of Jesus and everything. She had the book of Mary, like I said, that did not make it into the Bible, based on basically when Constantine was trying to consolidate everything and unify the view of Christianity and really develop the state-backed church. And so I started to research really what the book of Mary was about and really what she believed. And she believed more so in something called Gnosticism. It's always a tongue twister for me. Gnosticism, okay? It's spelled Gnostism, Gnosticism, okay? And basically it's a very, very early sector of Christianity. Because again, we're talking about when Jesus was walking the earth. This is how long ago this was. Because Mary Magdalene was alongside Jesus. Like this was all during Jesus's lifetime, this is how far back this goes, is what my point is, which makes me feel like this is like the very true essence of Christianity, which really parallels to what I believe in, which I'm about to get into, that was so validating to me. So again, she believed in Gnosticism, okay? And so I have this right here. I'm just going to read it. Again, feel free to research this. It's Gnosticism. And it says, Gnosticism was often closer to spirituality than organized religion. Here's why. This is from ChatGPT. Number one, there's direct experience over authority, meaning in the church, it's more so about you need to go through priests, bishops, or the church to connect to God, whereas Gnosticism is all about how every person has direct contact with God, with source, by going within. The more you go within, the closer you get to God. And specifically, it says Gnostics believed every person had a direct spark of the divine inside them. Meaning, if you hear when spiritual people who say like you are God, which a lot of religious people get triggered by, not trying to say that we have the pot, like that we are trying to supersede God. It's more so saying we are all, I guess how the religious people say that we are children of God, but really saying that we all carry God, the universe source within us, because we are just simply an extension and a manifestation of God, of source, because that is where we come from. So Gnostics believed every person had that direct spark of the divine within them. We carry God within us. We carry the universe within us because we are one. It says you didn't need priests, bishops, or churches to connect with God. Only awakening, which they call gnosis. Okay? And that's what I like really fully believe is like within my meditation, that's when I go to connect with God. Like, I don't think you need, that's kind of what I'm saying, where I've struggled with the construct of religion, that this narrative that you need to go to someone in order to connect. You need to be in church in order to be with God, or you need to go seek, you need to go connect with a priest to get higher leadership or guidance or whatever it is. I'm not saying that those people don't have a place. I'm just saying I think that to think that that is the only way to connect with God just does not make any sense with me, and it's not what my belief is. Going within is the truest way to connect with God, because God is within all of us. And that's what this says here. It says that only awakening or gnosis is when you really can experience God, which is what I also really resonate with, that term of like kind of spiritual awakening, waking up and really understanding that God is already within us. It's not something outside of us. Okay. And it says this is very similar to modern spirituality, which emphasizes personal experience over institutions. Meaning, what are you doing to connect with God and source on your own in your inner experience? What are you feeling? Because to me, it's like faith is a feeling. It's not necessarily this doing practice outside of ourselves, an outside blessing, this outside institution. It's this personal experience of God is felt, in my opinion. Faith is felt. Again, which we'll get into in the next episode. Then next thing, it says inner knowledge comes before it's valued over a doctrine. So Gnosticism was about self-discovery and awakening inner truth, which is also something that I preach about so much, of like going inwards, right? Knowing your truth, of finding that connection. Whereas Orthodox Christianity was about creeds and belief statements. This made Gnosticism more fluid, mystical, and individual. Another thing is mystical language. Gnostics' writings use poetry, parables, and symbols like light, darkness, awakening, and sleep. This reads more like mystical spirituality rather than rule-based religion. So it says Gnosticism is mystical, personal, and inner spirituality within the umbrella of early Christianity, whereas Orthodox Christianity is organized religion with creeds, hierarchy, and institutional structure, which that's exactly what I mean in my own personal interpretation of specifically the church, is that I think that it was not developed for a sense of power and control and money is crazy to me. Like, to me, it's very clear that was a very big reason why the church was founded, was used as a means of control, and even down to the kind of concept of fear. Like, I think a lot of the motivation in the church, in order to adhere to their rules, their outlines, etc., is that a lot of the times they use fear of you are not going to go to heaven or you're going to be ostracized in XYZ. They use fear kind of as this control tactic for adherence to what they believe in and what they want their community to believe in, essentially. And in Gnosticism, it says that they are trying to remove basically that concept of fear and to not live in fear and essentially live from a place of higher knowing, higher awareness, what I would like to say your higher self, and living from love, which again I think so insanely perfectly mirrors a lot of what I believe in and basically my whole kind of spiritual theology, I guess, if you will. I also just want to read this to you, the core beliefs of Gnostic Christianity. So it's more so about the inner spiritual knowledge of the divine. It says Gnostics taught that salvation comes from awakening to your true divine nature, not from church rituals or blind faith, meaning that we all hold the power within us, which is something I really wholeheartedly believe in. It says that they view the material world as flawed, whereas the spiritual realm was perfect, full of love and light, and like the true home of the soul, and humans carry a divine spark trapped within their bodies, waiting to be awakened to remember your true form and essentially where you come from. Gnostics saw Jesus not only as a savior, but as a teacher of the hidden wisdom, basically here to awaken people to their divine spark and true nature and show the way back to the light, which is what I've always believed, rather than everyone simply just worshiping Jesus for Jesus. Like, not that he wasn't incredible and a super, super powerful and enlightened person and being, but I think it's even more extends past it of he was trying to show the way back to their light, to remind people of their true innate power and what it really means to be divinely connected to source. It says many of these Gnostic texts were destroyed as heresy, but in 1945, there was a library that was found in Egypt with many important texts, such as the Gospel of Mary, Gospel of Philip, Gospel of Thomas. And the main differences from Orthodox Christianity and Gnostic Christianity is that Orthodox Christianity, the line that led to Catholicism and Protestantism, it focused on faith in Jesus' death and resurrection for salvation. It focuses on authority passed through apostles, bishops, and church hierarchy. And it also believes that the material world was seen as good and created by God, whereas Gnostic Christianity focuses on awakening inner knowledge. Authority was personal and mystical, not tied to institutional hierarchy, that the material world was flawed and true life was beyond it, and that women like Mary Magdalene could be spiritual leaders. And so it says, why was this Gnosticism suppressed, right? Why did this ever go away? Why was this kind of always trying to be erased and kicked to the curb in traditional Christianity and Catholicism? It says early church leaders, especially those aligned with Peter and Paul's teachings, wanted unity and control. Gnostic texts encouraged individual spiritual authority and challenged church hierarchy, again back to this power, control, political, money situation. you couldn't, it's the same thing. How is there going to be any sense of hierarchy and control if everyone believed that they already had their own inner spiritual authority and autonomy and guidance themselves? Of course, that's like the biggest control mechanism to say, well, you need us to find the divine and connect to God. You need us to do so. That puts them in a position of power rather than empowering everyone else to remember the spark and connection to the divine that they already have within them. And it said by the 4th century, after Constantine and the Council of Nicaea, not try to say that, Gnosticism was declared heretical, and most of its writings were destroyed. So it says heretical in a religious sense means a belief or teaching that goes against the official doctrine of a church or faith. To be heretical wasn't just about being different. It was seen as dangerous because it could divide the community or undermine church authority. For example, the Gospel of Mary and other Gnostic writings were labeled as heretical by the early church because they emphasized hidden knowledge and gave women leadership roles, which clashed with the hierarchy the bishops were building. Like, to me, this was mind-blowing, you guys. Like, I went down such an insane rabbit hole about this because I think, first of all, this shows how far back kind of this whole patriarchy kind of argument has developed, like way back then, which is absolutely insane. And it also was insane just because of basically how, like, genuinely, guys, like word for word, it's like declares like what I really believe in the sense of what faith is, and like finding that sweet spot between church and quote unquote religion and like spirituality and faith. And it just was absolutely mind blowing. A few more things to bring this home, speaking more so about what Gnosticism was about. What they believed as the human problem and solution. The problem necessarily isn't sin in Gnosticism in comparison to the Orthodox Christianity, but the problem is ignorance. People are asleep, hypnotized by the material world, unaware of their divine origin and like their true form. The solution is gnosis, direct knowledge that awakens the soul and shows the way back to basically their true form. Jesus is seen less as a sacrifice for sin and more of a divine emissary who descended from the higher realms. He came to reveal hidden knowledge that wakes people up and basically, again, remember their true form. As far as Gnostic practices, it's as well, it says we don't know everything, but evidence suggests that meditation, visions, and inner prayer were central. So in essence, it says early Gnostic Christianity was a mystical path of awakening, teaching that the world we see is a flawed reflection and that salvation lies in remembering who we really are, fragments of divine light destined to return home. Here we go. This is the other thing. This is what I wanted to touch on in fear. I couldn't find it before. Gnosticism wasn't about believing doctrines. It was about a shift in awareness. Okay, keyword. Realizing this world is not the whole story, right? There's more than what meets the eye. We have an origin, right? We're carrying God within us. It's about experiencing your inner self as part of the divine, right? And feeling liberated from fear, sin, and control of external authority. Basically what I was saying of how there's a lot of things in religion where they use fear tactics as a sense of control to get people to cooperate and do what they want to do, etc., etc. So this is all about feeling liberating from fear and sin and the outside control of external authority, knowing that you are the authority, you carry God within. We do not need to live from fear. We can live from a sense of higher awareness, our higher selves, living in a higher frequency of love, and have that be enough to drive us to do the right thing, to live in truth, and to live in love. And it's really all about the core of Gnosticism is basically a mystical path to union with the divine. So as you can see, this is honestly a very big rabbit hole that you can go down. I honestly, if you have any sense of like, if you love talking about this kind of stuff and discussing religion and all that, like I highly recommend exploring this because I felt like this was really mind blowing. Again, really speaking of like one of the earliest foundations of where kind of the patriarchy is stemming from, the sense of corruption, of control, of power, of using fear as a manipulation tactic, all of the things. And I found it also really fascinating of going to really the core of Christianity and what I've always kind of believed the core of it to be about, but wasn't really sure if that still even like counted as Christianity or religion. And like this to me was so validating to hear of like, no, this is a very core teaching and facet of Christianity, but it was removed and erased and pushed away because it didn't fit the church narrative of being able to have authority and control and power and political unity. And again, it was really validating because it allowed me to really see the cross-section of spirituality and religion, again, to something that I couldn't really name before. And I wasn't really sure if it was fully a cross section. Like, this completely confirmed and validated that there is a cross section, and this is the cross section where, yes, you can still believe in God, in Jesus, and in these higher powers and everything, and in the stories, but the man-made constructs of religion may have been picked and chosen and may not be the full complete story, and may have been altered to fit the narrative of the church based on what their ulterior motives were in order to lead people and lead a country and control a region. To sum it up, that's personally really what I believe in my faith at this point is, again, I believe in Jesus, I believe in God, I believe in a higher power, but I believe in the spiritual component of it, and I believe that the true essence is that God lies within each one of us, that the more that you can connect to who you truly are, your inner wisdom, the quieter you can get, the more inward you can go, the closer you become to God. I think it's about enlightenment in awakening and remembering our true form, and remembering that we are souls having a human experience, in remembering to live in love, in light, and in truth, rather than constantly being controlled by fear. I believe in the divine feminine, in the divine masculine. I believe that women are really powerful beings who do have incredible intuitional powers, who are very connected to their intuition, who carry a lot of wisdom. And it never made sense to me that that was like really just cut off in the church. If women are the one who have a womb, who are the portal to bring souls earthside and to bring souls into a body, it never made sense that why does the feminine seem to have kind of the secondary nature to it. And this proves that there is the divine polarity and unity of a divine masculine and feminine in the spiritual sector. And I very much so believe that we each have a direct experience with God. So anyways, I'm going to leave this here. I hope that I was able to explain that somewhat well. If you have any unanswered questions, like, please, I urge you to go do your own research. Like, this, of more than anything, is just to explain where I'm at, what I found to be very cool and validating, and like almost gave me more clarity on what I believe. It like was almost comforting in the sense of like, okay, I can finally say that I can define more so of what I believe in, I guess, if that makes sense. But I definitely recommend, like, urge you, do your own research. I'm also not trying to persuade you in any which way, just sharing where I'm at in my faith, because I used to get quite a few questions on that of like, what do I actually believe in? I think that is everything that I have to say. If I can think of anything that I missed after like I edit this and actually go through it, like maybe I'll add it into the next episode. The next podcast episode, I want to speak about, again, how to kind of start your journey in faith if you're someone who is curious about it, wants to dip your toe in, but is like overwhelmed of like not knowing even where to start and like are feeling disorientated. So that's going to be the next episode. I hope this was as fascinating to you as it was for me. I still think this is like really, really cool. I feel like I found like the core and root of what I've been searching for the past 5 years, to be fully honest with you. So I just think this is so cool. Again, if you're interested, watch the movie The Da Vinci Code. I was like mind blown. I think it's really cool. Again, it's technically a fictional story, but I think there's a lot of like symbolism in it and kind of like pointing to bigger messages. And lastly, I do want to remind you guys that I am hosting an all women's wellness retreat in Thailand this November, the 9th to the 15th. The last day to book is this Friday from when I'm posting this, September 19th. So if you're wanting to come with us, now is your last chance to book a spot and come join us. We have 14 amazing women. I will have the trip page linked down below. I want to thank you guys, if you did stay to listen to this, for having an open mind no matter what you believe. I just think it's still even cool at the very least to have these hypothetical conversations, if you want to have it as that. Like, I think it's just very cool to have explorative conversation in this realm. I think it's very fascinating. So again, thank you guys for listening. I'm sending you guys so much love, and hopefully I'll see you guys in my next epi next week. Peace out.